Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, our good friends, and certainly great friends of DawgNation for a long time. You're also our good friend, too, so we have done our best to get a good show ready for you today. Obviously, a lot on kind of what's next for Georgia after National Signing Day. Kind of came and went pretty quietly for the Dogs, but still a lot on the horizon. Now, I shouldn't say totally quiet. Maybe quiet in reference to the 2021 class, but there's a lot to talk about when it comes to 2022. And this is not a consolation prize. This isn't a, hey, look over here, watch the right hand, don't pay attention to the left hand. Bear Alexander's commitment for Georgia was a lot more than just, let you down easy after not getting what you want when it comes to Terry and Arnold. So we'll talk about that on the show today. Terence Edwards is going to stop by. We'll talk some Georgia football with the great former Dog there on that. Recap some of the stuff around the rest of the SEC when it came to National Signing Day. And very interesting appearance for five-star Georgia quarterback commit Gunnar Stockton last night on Before the Hedges. We will hear a little bit of what Stockton had to say on today's show, and then I'm going to encourage you to go check out the full show with Jeff Sintel on the DawgNation video channel. So we are jam-packed, fully loaded for a Thursday, but we could not do it without you, so I'm glad you're here. Also thankful to have Merriweather and Tharp with us as well. In fact, DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans presented by Merriweather and Tharp, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
One of the things that we talk about a lot on this show is how you measure the progress that Georgia is undergoing in the early days of the Kirby Smart administration as head coach. Smart about to enter year 6. That's still very young as a head coach, and that's still, kind of early stages in comparison to how built out some of the other programs that Georgia's competing with are. And so sometimes, you're kind of curious of, is Georgia on track to get where it wants to go? Especially given the big issue, which is that Georgia fans kind of only measure the program's success by whether or not it wins a national championship, something that Georgia's been waiting a long time to do, even during the Smart era. That seems like they've had a couple of chances to do so and kind of missed out on that. So there's even a little restlessness, even within kind of the years in which Kirby has been head coach, about when is Georgia going to break through and win that national championship. And as we say a lot, if the only thing you're measuring on is, are you the number one team out of 130 teams that play big-time college football, sometimes if it's simply a yes or no conundrum of yes, do you want it, or no, you didn't, if that's all there is, then if you fall short of that national championship goal, sometimes it can feel a little bit difficult to measure the progress of where you are as a program. If the only thing you're measuring yourself by is, are we the national championships, or is Georgia the national championships? If that's all you're measuring yourself by, then falling short of that kind of leaves you to wonder, well, how close is Georgia to getting to that point? How close is Georgia to being as good as fans want them to be? And it's certainly a fair point to bring up. And one of the things we try to do from time to time is highlight the ways in which progress is occurring for Georgia, because sometimes it is difficult to notice it, and sometimes it's difficult to measure it. But you can look at the current scenario facing Georgia football, and you can compare that to recent years of the program, and you see a way in which the Georgia program is maturing, the players on the roster kind of maturing, to give Georgia a narrative going into the start of the new season that is different than maybe some of the stuff that's been in place before. Let me give you a very specific example of what I'm talking about. Listen, I speak into a microphone for a living. I'm kind of addicted to hyperbole. I love hype. Even though we're trying to have kind of a hype-free off-season around here, I still, probably do better at that some days than others. I'm just kind of always going to gravitate towards really bombastic conjecture. I like hot takes. I like stuff like that. I like to kind of, blow, players up to the moon sometimes and, get everybody really excited. I like to be excited myself. And with that in mind, one of my favorite kinds of questions that Kirby Smart can be asked at a press conference is, hey, of the incoming freshmen, who's impressing you right now? Who's out there really getting it done? Who's, doing whatever else? I love questions like that, because any name that gets mentioned all of a sudden becomes great fodder for us to say, well, how good can this guy be? Is he going to be the next so-and-so? Is he going to do the whatever? We just kind of like that kind of stuff. And, we kind of probably do it with a little bit of a wink and a nod, but nonetheless, we kind of enjoy that. Well, Smart, now going into year 6 as a head coach, is probably kind of catching on to the fact that people like me love hyping up Georgia players, and people like me just like the hyperbole and the the energy that comes around these conversations. So yesterday, Smart was asked during his press conference that Smart was very clear to say was not a signing day press conference, but he was asked, of the guys who've been here, a lot of early enrollees for Georgia thus far this year, of the guys that you've seen working out, whatever it is they're doing, who's impressed you thus far? And Smart was not having any of that question. Here is Kirby from yesterday.
You mean, do you want me to create an unrealistic expectation for them? Is that what you want me to do? And, I've got to be around them a little bit. Yeah, I've got to see them work out and lift in the weight room. But the guys we got to see practice briefly, I think we got maybe 3 or 4. We talked about this before. Maybe 3 or 4 practices in with those guys before we had to go to Atlanta for the bowl. So, no, I'm not ready to put any stamps on anybody or any unrealistic expectations on anybody, because I know that's what a lot of people want to talk about is those guys. And for me, unrealistic expectations is the biggest avenue to failure. And I don't want to place that burden on anyone. I want these guys to grow and learn and work hard, and they'll get a chance to perform out in the spring.
So Smart rebukes the notion of unrealistic expectations. He's obviously probably smart to do that because, like you said, you don't want to put a sign on the back of any of these incoming freshmen to put more on them than already exists when you're trying to step in and compete for playing time in a big SEC program like that. We kind of understand where Kirby's coming from on that. But let me just say it this way. That this, to me, though, is an example of how the Georgia program has grown since Smart took over this job in 2016 and really kind of got things going starting in around 2017. That if you look around, Smart says he wants to push back against the notion of unrealistic expectations. But if you really pay attention to this, there aren't that many unrealistic expectations to push back on. I mean, which freshman from this highly touted group for the class of 2021, another top-flight class, not number 1 ranked, not greatest class of all time, the way that Alabama's kind of being pegged with, but still really good. But of the guys who were there, who has unrealistic expectations? Brock Vandegrift's a 5-star quarterback, but he's not even expected to start this season for Georgia. JT Daniels is the entrenched starter. Lavassier Carroll, great-looking running back out of IMG Academy. But gosh, we'll spend this entire offseason talking about the James Cooks and the Zamir Whites and the Kendall Miltons and this whole host of running backs. Not to say that Lavassier Carroll can't be a big-time player at Georgia, but really no one is expecting him to sort of step in and play right away. You could say same thing about guys in the defensive secondary or kind of go up and down the list. Amarius Mims may be one of the best offensive linemen that Georgia has recruited in recent memory, but I don't think anyone is saying, oh my gosh, if Mims doesn't step in and start for Georgia this year, this offensive line can't find 5 guys that can play, because the truth is there were, highly rated guys, the Broderick Jones, the Tate Ratledges from the previous class who were also kind of waiting in their wings to do this. If you went back and listened, in other words, to DawgNation Dailies presented by Meriwether and Tharp from years past, I think you could usually find an example of 1 or 2 freshmen that we were coming pretty close to begging to be big and significant early for Georgia, because there was this glaring hole in the roster that if it couldn't be filled by a freshman, then it likely wasn't going to be filled. Now listen, Georgia's roster isn't perfect moving into this 2021 season. No one's is. But this is not the Georgia of 2017, 2018, maybe even 2019, where you really needed freshmen to play well, or otherwise you just weren't going to quite have enough depth. That's not the case anymore. They are not a necessity. They are now a luxury. And listen, it's a luxury that we enjoy celebrating. Every single name in this 2021 signing class is a name that has a chance to be a big-time contributor to Georgia. I can say that without too much puffery attached to it. It's obviously true. But in terms of Georgia is ruined, Georgia is doomed, if one of those guys doesn't step up and play well right away, That's not the case for UGA anymore. The Georgia class has grown. I should say the Georgia program has grown to the point where not only does Kirby want to push back against unrealistic expectations, at this point in time, there aren't even that many unrealistic expectations to push back on. Georgia fans like the players that Georgia signed, but I believe the smart UGA fans, and that's most of the people listening and watching us right now, are actually paying attention to guys who are already here when it comes to contributing to the championship success that Georgia hopes to enjoy this season. With that said, let me kind of shift gears to the one piece of news that did occur yesterday. The four-star defensive back Terrion Arnold making his choice of Alabama over Georgia. And, there's a saying in politics that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. I think what that means is, listen, you say a lot of things when you're in the campaign trail, but once you're actually elected to any office, whatever party you want to think about here, actually getting those things done is actually a lot harder than it kind of sounds when you're on the campaign trail. Sometimes I think the recruiting trail kind of works the same way. It definitely got my attention in the story with Terrion Arnold at DawgNation yesterday, and Terrion was great enough to spend some time with Jeff Sintel going into his commitment announcement. He talked about the notion that basketball factored 40% into his decision. Those were his own words there. Hard to imagine a young man's going to be a great defensive back in a place like Alabama or Georgia and also, have a basketball be a big part of his life here in 2021. That's a hard thing to imagine doing, but that's something that Arnold, said that he wanted. I hope that Alabama keeps all the promises to him, apparently, that it made to kind of get him there and in the program, but I'm certain the young man went about his due diligence to make the decision that he ultimately made. But when it comes to what I said before about Kirby Smart and, kind of pushing back against realistic expectations, we saw a lot of real talk from Kirby yesterday when it came to the current situation around Georgia football. In fact, even before Arnold made his decision, Smart likely knowing what it was going to be, but even before Arnold had made his decision about what he was going to do in choosing between Georgia and Alabama, Smart was also in that press conference yesterday giving you some very real talk when it came to the situation with Georgia in the defensive back room. We'll all say, those of us who've watched the Arnold film, those of us who've followed his recruitment, certainly reading the things that Jeff Sintel has written, we'll all say that Arnold is an excellent, excellent prospect. But as Smart, I think, kind of alluded to yesterday, without so much saying it in bold-faced type, that for Georgia this upcoming season, the end-of-season goals, the pursuit of national championships, things like that, were not going to be determined by one more addition to the 2021 class. That's not to disparage Arnold. It's just to tell the truth. Here is Kirby from yesterday on the current state of the Georgia defensive back situation.
Well, I think number one thing is secondary is a development position too, especially for us. When you look at it across the board, the number of players we've had play as freshmen have been few and far between when it comes to defensive backs. There's certainly been role players, but not many guys that just step in and go play. So it's a position we have to develop. We've got some guys we've been developing for a while that'll need to step up and play. We've also got some young players that we just signed, we just talked about, that'll have to grow quickly, and we'll get an opportunity to compete for positions. We've certainly got availability at that spot, and we've known that was coming for a long time because we had some talented players that we knew were going to have the ability to leave as juniors. So these young guys will begin to work. Some of the older guys that got to play in the bowl game more than normal, they're going to get a lot of opportunities, and we're going to try to develop these guys and get ready to play. I mean, the best help for that secondary will be the front four, getting some pressure and being able to rush. So that'll be just as important as anything else we do.
Smart says a lot there, obviously acknowledging that young guys will have a chance to compete for playing time, but I take that sentence from Smart, those words from Smart, to be more of, we're going to lean on experience in the secondary spot because I do think experience matters. Now, we've seen young guys play for Georgia before. Tyson Campbell played, a good bit as a freshman in 2018. You can mention DJ Daniel in there, too, kind of getting on the field a good bit early in his Georgia career. But for the most part, secondary is a spot where experience matters. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I would have loved for Georgia got Terrion Arnold. I think he was a really good player. And Georgia losing him to Alabama is an L. Georgia took an L when it comes to Terrion Arnold. But whatever the Arnold story is going to be is one that's going to be told in future years, 2022. 2023, beyond that. For Georgia right now, the issue is how good can you be in 2021? And as Smart rightly says, I don't think that Terrion Arnold would have determined that really much one way or the other. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. And it's great to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, also now on Twitch as well. We are doing some great things over there on the Twitch stream, so fun to be doing that. Also radio as well in Athens, Sports Radio 960 The Ref. We love to be there in the Classic City on the radio each and every day, and as a podcast, wherever you find them. That's how DawgNation Daily began, so I'm still very proud of the podcast platforms, the Apple, the Google, the Spotify, SoundCloud, world-famous DawgNation.com, a bunch of other platforms y'all tell me about that I'm not even really aware of. However you get to us, just so thankful that you're able to do that, and really gracious and grateful for our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for making it all possible. Your source for Georgia divorce. What that means is, for those of you who find yourself going through the divorce process, or you believe that it's a possibility for you here in this year of 2021, I am sorry that you're going through that. I certainly hate that for you, but I am confident in this, that this process that you may feel has left you feeling broken at the moment, you can be made to feel whole again when you put a smart person or a smart organization like Merriweather and Tharp in service to you, helping you navigate all this when it comes to the relationship with your children and your finances and all the things that are potentially impacted by a divorce. Merriweather and Tharp can help explain all of that to you. They've been through these kinds of cases thousands of times. And even though your situation is specific to you and your circumstances might be unique, the experience that Merriweather and Tharp has gained through all of this, that can still be an aid to you. So find out more about them today by checking them out online. It's theatlantadivorceteam.com, theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. We're going to get Terence Edwards, the former Georgia wide receiver, coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse today. Let me just say this. There are a lot of Georgia fans who looked at, the loss to Bama yesterday with Terry and Arnold of, oh, man, goodness, it's still Rich getting richer. Rich getting richer. You can't do anything to slow down the Alabama momentum. And, admittedly, I'm impressed by what Bama has done on the recruiting trail. And there is a level of program prestige that Saban has established there that Georgia right now can't quite match. And that can feel frustrating to UGA fans. But it is important to note this. Like I said, this is not just, puffery sugarcoating to make you feel better about what happened with Terry and Arnold. But it is objectively true that the way that Georgia fans kind of look up at Alabama and say, how can my favorite program ever get up to there? There are about 120-something teams in the country that look at Georgia and kind of think the same thing about what Georgia's able to do. Let me give you a very specific instance of this. Yesterday, Georgia got a quite significant piece to its 2022 class. One of the top 10 defensive tackles in the country, one of the top 25 players in the state of Texas, Bear Alexander, putting it out on Twitter that he's 100% committed to the University of Georgia. This is a big-time defensive tackle prospect, a huge head-to-head win for Georgia over a number of programs, maybe most significantly maybe Texas A&M. And I want you to frame this in the right possible way here, the best possible way. For Georgia to be getting such a significant piece to its 2022 class, when most of the SEC, Auburn, South Carolina, Tennessee, certainly a lot of the SEC, was still scrambling to try to finish off its 2021 class, is a level of program prestige that most of the rest of the country can simply only dream about or fantasize about even aspiring toward. That Kirby Smart has told us before, that when it comes to these big guys, big offensive and defensive linemen, that these are recruiting battles that are waged over the course of years because there are so few of them. The true athletic big man, the defensive lineman in this case, there just aren't a lot of those guys, so the recruitment for these guys is going to be long range. So Georgia clearing up and taking care of most of the business of the 2021 class and all the previous cycles, kind of great work on that being done early, simply opens the door for Georgia to get a head start on the coveted players for the next class. Alexander, an example of that for the class of 2022. In fact, yesterday, our buddy Connor Riley had a chance to ask Kirby Smart on that, about the accelerated process year over year with a lot of guys being signed in December. And Smart said he's always trying to be forward-thinking when it comes to recruiting. This is more from Kirby.
I've always seen January as a chance to jump ahead on those other guys. We just have a little more time now because you're on less 2021 kids in January of 2021 because your class is pretty much done. So we've always put a big emphasis on that next class. That hasn't changed. It probably just seems to be that way. And I think those kids are probably making earlier decisions with the outlook that they may not get visits. They may not get an opportunity to go places and do things.
So listen, we've talked a lot about a few names here, a lot over the course of the last week or so on this show. Rick Gilbert, y'all know how much I like him. Terry and Arnold, you know how much I had grown to like him on the recruiting trail. Bear Alexander as well. I'm not quite so sure when it's all said and done, like 4 years from now, that Alexander isn't the best player, most important piece of any of the guys we've talked about a lot over the course of the last 7 days. And it just so happens that's the guy that Georgia got. When it comes to these big defensive linemen, in other words, that's not a test that you can cram for. You can't pull an all-nighter and get in and earn a relationship with a guy like Alexander as a way of earning that commitment. You've got to do that over the course of years, and you've got to be able to take care of all your other recruiting business along the way so you can get that head start on a guy like Alexander. Now, the truth is, maybe this recruitment's not quite done. Maybe, someone like A&M still battles to try to get him back at some point in time. But Georgia will be recruiting Alexander from the position of strength, holding the public commitment here, knowing they've been in on him on a long time. It's an example of a level of program prestige that Georgia has. Not quite the same level as Alabama, maybe at the moment, I'll admit that. But it's a level of program prestige for Georgia, unlike anything that most of the country could even dream about. It's DawgNation Daily here today. Good to have you with us. Before we are done, we will hear from five-star UGA quarterback commit Gunnar Stockton, who was with Jeff Sentell last night on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. We'll also look at the signing day landscape from around the rest of the SEC as well. But for now, on a whole lot more on what's going on with Georgia football, great voice to address all of that with. It's our buddy Terence Edwards here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Hope you enjoy it right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Get ready to say hello to Terence Edwards. Always great to talk some Georgia football with him. And, Terence brings expertise to us in a number of ways. First of all, he was himself a very good player, but he's also a guy that kind of works alongside a lot of recruits right now who will eventually be making their college decisions. And oftentimes I'm kind of interested in kind of what it's like to be on the ground in that moment with them. And Terence, if you don't mind, let me bring you in on a topic that I was briefly addressing a moment ago, that it seems like recruits, when they're getting ready to make their decision, they hear so many things. Safeties get told they can be cornerbacks. Cornerbacks get told they can be wide receivers. Wide receivers get told they can be quarterbacks. There's this attempt to kind of tell recruits whatever they want to hear. And if I was a recruit, it'd be very easy for me to be very attracted to all those things that I was hearing. As someone who, kind of works with players, is himself a former player, how do you keep it real when it comes to stuff like this and kind of know who's telling you the truth and who might be exaggerating something to maybe make you want to go to that school? How do the players do that in these days?
The first thing, I just could go back to my recruiting days and what teams was telling me. And normally the first thing that a team tells you is the truth. They're going to tell you the position that they think is best for you. But then if you have some pushbacks or some reservations of, I want to play this, then they're going to tell you, you can play whatever you want to play. We'll just figure out when you get here. Then that's to let you know they're just trying to get you there. Most schools will let you know. Like I was an athlete coming out, so I knew that Georgia was going to play me in the same mold of how they played Hines, Alabama in the same way, but Auburn wanted me strictly as a quarterback. So I understood and knew what I was getting into coming to Georgia, or if I went to Alabama or Auburn. I knew the position that they were going to play me. Tennessee wanted me to play DB. That's something I didn't want to do, so that's why they got knocked off the list pretty early. So I think the first interaction with recruits is probably the most truthful. But once the recruit has some reservation about that position or start to say, I want to try another position, they're going to tell you what you want to hear to get you found on those dotted lines.
I think that's really wise. I think that's really well said. And Terence, one of the things I think is to be as good a player as you were, to be as good a player as many of the guys we talk about in the show, high school players moving on the SEC, to be that good, to compete at that level, you have to have an extraordinary degree of self-confidence. You wouldn't be able to survive if you didn't believe in yourself. And yet sometimes, and I'm saying this as someone on the outside looking in because I've never been in this position, given the fact that my son has my genes, he probably won't be in this position as he gets a little older either. But when I look at this as an outsider on the outside looking in, it certainly seems like the recruiting process can occasionally find a way to use a player's self-confidence against him, because obviously no great high school player, I would say for the most part, understands just how tough college is going to be when you actually get there, that it's hard to imagine you won't be the one that wins the competition for playing time. But there are a lot of really good players all across the SEC who aren't playing as much as they probably thought they would when they were coming out of high school, and finding some way to keep some sort of perspective about that is probably a pretty important thing to do, right?
Right. Most players come in with the confidence that, I was a big fish at high school. I'm going to be the big fish once I get it on the college level. And it humbles you real quick. I mean, not going to name names, but there was a DB that came in 2002, my senior year, with the confidence level was very high. But myself, Fred Gibson, Damian Gary, Michael Johnson, Reggie Brown humbled him real quick. So a lot of these guys come in with the, I'm the 5-star recruit. I mean, I've heard stories of guys getting arguments of, I'm a 5-star, you're a 4-star, and once you get on that field, those stars don't matter, because guys have been here, done that, and understand the college game. So this game will humble you real quick. It will bring you back down to reality that just put on your boots and get to work and be the best player you could be.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that experience matters, and how you learn to operate on a college practice field or a game field is going to give you a huge leg up, really, against anyone who's not played before, no matter how talented they were coming out of high school. With that in mind, it's a good transition to the situation facing Georgia's defensive secondary. I obviously would have loved to see Georgia get Terry and Arnold yesterday. I think Arnold is a good-looking prospect. I'm sure he'll have a very good career. And yet I do think for Georgia's secondary for this upcoming season, it's experience that matters, whether it's guys who are in the program who get a chance to kind of take that next step, or, and this is the part I'm curious about for you, how much of a need do you think it potentially is to see Georgia kind of maybe utilize that transfer portal and bring in a defensive back, maybe specifically a cornerback that's played somewhere before? We talked to you about your opinion about the Georgia defensive backs last week, but when it comes to, what Georgia needs right now, how much does that experience matter, and how much might you encourage UGA take a look at that portal and see who might actually be out there for the Dogs?
I think so. I think the portal can be good, but at some point, man, these 5-star, 4-star guys that you recruit got to step up and come and play. And I like the talent that we have. Although they are inexperienced, I like their talent. Ringo, Jalen Kimber, I think two guys is going to be tremendous at the corner position. I think those two are the corners of the future. The 3 cornerbacks that we brought in this year, it's the experience is the only thing that we lack. And if we go into the portal and get a guy in the portal, I think it's the leadership that he's going to bring more than talent. We do need some guys that have played college football and understand college football. And going into that first game, man, the corners are going to be put to a test against Clemson.
Yeah.
So experience matters, but also talent matters as well.
So we found out yesterday officially something we kind of already knew for the most part, that Will Muschamp is going to be working at Georgia. And when Smart talked about Muschamp yesterday, he said something kind of interesting, that Muschamp would be the kind of guy that can coach the coaches. He has been an SEC head coach at 2 different stops, even if he wasn't greatly successful at either one of those places, South Carolina or Florida, years before. You still learn a lot by being in that role. How much do you think it benefits Georgia to have someone like Muschamp around, who has been a head coach, who has that experience and has coached against Georgia, by the way, and maybe knows some of Georgia's tendencies? Obviously, he beat Georgia a couple of years ago as a pretty significant underdog. Do you think the presence of Muschamp has the potential for value for UGA?
I do. I think on a couple fronts. I think he's a bulldog through and through first and foremost, so that helps. I think he kind of raised Kirby once Kirby got to Georgia, so Kirby was the young pup, and Muschamp kind of raised him to be the player that he was going to be. Now, in the coaching game, you cannot have too many guys that you trust. I think that's the biggest thing, that he trusts Muschamp. And Muschamp can actually elevate him into be a better coach. He can actually probably sit Kirby down and look, this is what we saw from the outside looking in. This is your tendencies as a head coach. So he can self-evaluate himself from a long-time friend. And let's bring in the coaching aspect of it. Muschamp has been a very successful defensive coordinator, might have not been that successful as a head coach, but he knows ball, and you cannot have too many guys in the building that really understand defenses.
Here's the other thing, too. Georgia's got 2 games this upcoming season that listen, every game counts, things like that. But, the Clemson game is a national showcase game because the Tigers are always in the playoff. Florida's a huge game for UGA because it's likely to decide the SEC East, and it's obviously a revenge game. Florida beat Georgia a year ago. If you've got the kind of analyst, and I think that Muschamp could be one of these guys, if you've got the kind of quality control people that can allow a portion of your staff to get a look ahead about those big games. You got to prepare week to week for the team that you're playing. But if you can also get that opportunity for off-field coaches to look ahead and, do some early work on Florida, certainly off-season work getting ready for Clemson, that extra pair of hands I think could come in handy for those two games that probably really matter, let's face it, more than the rest on the Georgia schedule.
Oh, I totally agree. I think this the great Nick Saban, I'm going to say great because I think he is the GOAT of college football. He kind of started this trend. He's always a trendsetter of getting ex-coaches to come in and kind of rehab their career. And just look at all the coaches that he's brought in, ex-head coaches, and I think that's when his mystique of Alabama just jumped because of these, I ain't going to call them problem coaches, but coaches that got fired. He brought them in, come and be analysts. They became coordinators. Now they're back head coaches. I think this is kind of the same way that Muschamp is going to do. I think it's a time that he can relax a little bit more, not being the captain of the whole ship. Just like you said, there's a couple of games out the year that he can actually start breaking these teams down. And once we get to those opponents, we got a guy with his experience that already broke these teams down. And I think you can get an advantage that way.
Let me squeeze in one more thing before we let you go. And, Terrence, you're always generous with your time, and I appreciate that. Kirby talked yesterday about kind of a mid-April date for G-Day. It certainly sounds like right now, assuming the virus cooperates, that Georgia's planning for a normal spring practice leading into some form of a normal spring game. We'll see how that takes shape in the weeks ahead. Rest of the SEC, I guess, doing the same thing. My point, though, is for Georgia, who's bringing back its offensive coordinator, who's bringing back its quarterback, and all these guys that missed that spring practice a year ago, wide receivers, your position included, how valuable would those spring practices be, assuming Georgia gets to kick those things off in 5 or 6 weeks?
Oh, it's valuable. I mean, you just look at the cohesiveness this group is bringing back. We're bringing back most of the O-line, all the skill positions, a quarterback now that we believe is the guy that can lead us to the promised land. It's going to be big for the defense. It's going to be big to having a guy like Ricky LeCounte not in the back end anymore, having that leadership. It's time for Chris Smith and other guys to bring in and be that leader of the defense. Now, you got these young guys at corner who's ultra talented but inexperienced. It's time for them to grow up now. It's time for guys like Chris Smith in the back end to lead them. So spring is going to be big for these guys offensively and defensively.
Hey, I love seeing you on social media. You're always out there in the bubble, as you call it, working, grinding every day with these wide receivers. For folks who want to get some training, or for folks who want their son to get some training and really learn how to catch the ball and do everything that wide receivers at this level are supposed to be able to do, the great high school level in the state of Georgia and beyond, how can folks get in touch with the individual training you're providing?
You can reach me at Terence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy on all social media, and that bubble work is full effect right now every Monday and Wednesdays from 5:30 to 7.
Boy, Terence, I love to see it. Appreciate you working hard out there for that next generation of football player. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to speak to you again soon.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So Terence said something there that I think is really, really wise. And, I jokingly said that I'm not a football player, and I don't want to put, my son's business out there, but just given the fact that he, has my genes, he's probably not going to be playing the SEC either, if I had to guess. Maybe he'll surprise me one day, but if I had to guess, that's probably not the path that he's going to travel. But we do have plenty of people who watch and listen to the show every day whose sons will play in the SEC. And I think this is really wise from Terence. He said the first thing that a coach tells you is the most likely to be truthful. We see you playing this position. And as the conversation goes on, well, actually, I see myself more as this position, because every position group has kind of a glamour spot, right? It's like offensive tackle is the glamour spot of the offensive line, especially left tackle. Wide receiver a little more glamorous than defensive back, but within the defensive back world, cornerback a little more glamorous than safety. All positions matter, but there is a little bit of a perceived glamour around certain positions. And you talk to a recruit long enough, you kind of find out, he kind of values this. Sometimes tight ends want to be wide receivers. You may have heard that from time to time. That when you kind of have that sort of idea of the glamour position in your mind, the more you talk to a coach, the more he will kind of start to say, yeah, you can come here and play that position. Or as Terence said, and this is a great one, yeah, just come on campus and we'll figure it out once you get here. Boy, that's really a clue about something. You want to play basketball? Come over here. We'll figure it out once you get here. Something along those lines. I think Terrence's words here are really wise, though. The first thing a coach tells you in that first conversation you have with him, his evaluation of you then is the most likely to be truthful. I think that's really, really smart. That's probably worth jotting down for those of you who think you might be, in that world at some point in time. Let's transition here. Let's do our SEC through. And, of course, it's great to have all of you with us here today as we pay attention to everything that's going on. As I mentioned before, Alabama, #1 signing class, they're saying of all time. And listen, all you can do is shake their hand and give them credit for it. I'm not gonna disparage them. I'm not gonna say anything. You just simply have to say that Bama was a recruiting machine for this 2021 cycle, truly the likes of which none of us have ever seen. There's also, I think, an attempt to try to explain it. How did it happen? I'll say it like this. There's a certain luxury watch. It's kind of known as the luxury watch leader. I'm not going to start mentioning brand names here, but if you think about it, you know what I'm talking about. If you ever go to a message board, and there are message boards for watch connoisseurs, the most famous luxury watch is not the most beloved luxury watch within that kind of watch timepiece connoisseur group. People that do their research kind of find that the luxury name brand might not actually be the best thing that's out there. Same thing when it comes to luxury automobiles, things like that. That the most famous luxury brands oftentimes are not the most coveted brands for true connoisseurs within that kind of product line. I think the same thing can kind of be true a little bit for college football a little bit too. Alabama clearly this year leaned on prestige, leaned on its own luxury brand. All the first-round picks, national championships, and things like that. And in a year in which there was no chance for visits, in a year when there was no chance for the kind of personal, authentic connections, well, just the most respected, well-known luxury brand is just as good a choice as any. And so for this 2021 pandemic cycle, I think that clearly worked. I will say that the notion that Alabama is also going to build the best class of all time for 2022 and 2023, I think it'll be an elite class. You certainly expect it to be, but the notion that it'll ever be this good again, once you arm, coaches like Kirby Smart who are good at building authentic personal relationships, once you do that, once you open that door back up again, that does give potential leverage, not just for Georgia, other programs as well, but it does give potential leverage for Georgia to make up some of that ground again. That'll be worth watching as we head into the 2022 cycle even deeper. Do things eventually get back to normal, and coaches who are good at building relationships, about being more than just commoditizing the college football experience. The coaches who are good at that, do they have that weapon back in their arsenal again? That'll certainly be worth paying attention to. Let me tell you something that's not getting nearly enough attention, but it should. Did you see the class that Texas A&M signed? #7 nationally, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Team ranking. But an example completely of how Jimbo Fisher is totally transforming that program. One of the things that we said about Jimbo when he arrived at Texas A&M was he had inherited a program that was still very closely connected to the finesse style of the Big 12. That's just kind of what Texas A&M was. They'd been out of the Big 12 for a while, but as the saying goes, you can take the team out of the Big 12, but sometimes you can't take the Big 12 out of the team. And Texas A&M in the SEC in the early stages was just a soft finesse football team. I don't think it helped them that they had Kevin Sumlin, a soft finesse coach, as their coach. Texas A&M did not have the requisite physicality to win in the SEC. If you've got Johnny Manziel, you can go to Tuscaloosa and pull an upset. That's what A&M did in 2012. But that's really all they had to show for the early years of their time in the SEC. But Jimbo Fisher is building it real, and he's building it right. You bring in L.J. Johnson, #4 running back in the country, I believe, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. Last year, A&M ran the football. And by bringing L.J. Johnson, I think that's a signal that they're looking to run the ball again. Look at the work that A&M did along its offensive line. Jimbo was very complimentary of that group in his press conference yesterday, bringing in guys like Shamar Turner for the defensive line, Elijah Judy, who you may remember as a one-time Georgia commit, that Jimbo is building it on line of scrimmage. He's building it in the front seven. He's doing it with the running game. You will see what happens with him at quarterback, but you want to watch a program transformation occur. Look at the recent recruiting classes for Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. It's quiet because it's below the level of Georgia and it's below the level of Alabama, but it ain't that far below. It's probably worth paying attention to exactly what's happening there in College Station after a almost playoff year for this team a year ago. I was going to do a couple things on like South Carolina, who, boy, that is a messy roster. I think they signed like 6 guys yesterday. Barely a top 100 recruiting class for them right now. Maybe desperately looking to the portal or leaning on some transfer guys they've already brought in. I saw where Josh Heupel has another high school coach mad at him now for pulling a scholarship. This is going back to his time at UCF. Heupel's last easy day was several days ago. Once you become a head coach at Tennessee, the things that you do as a coach just get a lot more attention. No one cares what happens at UCF. Nobody cares at all. It's one of the reasons why it was never a serious thing. They were a national championship contender because they just don't play with the same spotlight that SEC programs do. Heupel can be yanking scholarships and doing this and that and breaking promises right before signing day all you want when you're down there in Orlando where all anybody cares about is amusement parks. When we get to the SEC, your actions are just more scrutinized. And certainly Heupel is kind of finding that in his early days there as Tennessee coach. We got more stuff to do. We'll just do this in the days ahead. Let's go ahead and for right now call that an end to your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, I want to look last night at Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Really good interview that Jeff Sintel did with brand new Georgia quarterback commit, the 5-star of the class of 2022, Gunnar Stockton. And there was one sequence in particular of this interview, and I hope you'll go on the DawgNation video channels and check out the entire thing for yourself. But there was one particular sequence that got mentioned by Stockton in his interview with Jeff that I think brings up 2 pretty interesting ideas as it relates to the recruiting process for Stockton, but also the recruiting process all the way around for all guys right now. This is good stuff from Gunnar talking about why he chose UGA.
What was the biggest reason why Georgia?
Just staying. I mean, you always had a chance to win the national championship, and that's a dream of mine. And they always have a chance and good team and just having fun.
Did you have to do this without, you didn't have visits or whatever? Did you lean on visits, or was it just totally relationships here with this decision?
Visits. Everybody's going to have the nice facilities, locker room, and stuff as far as that goes. But just relationships and just getting to know everybody is a big part of it.
So let me tell you what my takeaway is from hearing that from Gunnar Stockton. That much the same way that Terry and Arnold framed his choice of Alabama as a business decision, and clearly business has been good for Bama, they've won a ton of national championships. There is also an opportunity because of the perennial contender status of Georgia for someone like Stockton to view Georgia as a business decision for him. My dreams of winning championships, my dreams of playing in the biggest and best games, I can achieve that at Georgia. And if you're a UGA fan, I think you take a lot of comfort in that. But beyond that, and I mean this not just for Stockton, but everybody, I also like the idea that Georgia for him is more than a business decision, that Georgia for him is a place where he can feel deep personal connections, and it can be about more than just a bunch of mercenaries getting together as players and coaches to go out and win a national championship at all costs, and no one has any fun with each other, no one enjoys each other, because frankly, as a fan, after a while, that can be a little tiresome to even cheer for. You want to feel good about the bond that people are trying to form with each other along the way, and you like the idea of Georgia recruiting on the basis of more than just a business decision, come here to, win championships, go to the NFL, and kind of move on from that. You want it to be about more than just that, and at Georgia, I think it has a chance to be that. So from Stockton in that particular instance, I like the idea that he thinks he can come to UGA and win a championship. I do like that. But I like even more the fact that he also said it's a place that I feel comfortable. It's a place that I can feel at home. It's a place that I can feel happy and enjoy my time while I'm here. And honestly, over the long haul, I'm not quite so sure that isn't the more valuable recruiting pitch. It is certainly one that seems to have worked on Gunnar. So as we get ready to wrap up today, boy, the band really firing up for that fight song there. They must have been really enjoyed the show today. Feeling good about Gunnar Stockton and Bear Alexander, the fight song playing good and hard right there. All right, so let's do this. A couple of things. First of all, Gator Hater Roll Call. Time now to award our golden shoe winner for today. And I apologize, I actually got this sent to me more than once. So I have selected Jermaine King as the winner of our golden shoe today. This is really funny. In relationship to the EA Sports college football video game that is coming out, apparently allowing for more celebrations. Jermaine says, I just stole this from Facebook, LOL, for the Golden Shoe Award. He says, the meme down here says, the next installment of the NCAA football will include more post-play celebrations, which has swagger, signature. There's also a button where you can throw a shoe. Very funny from Jermaine King right there. Appreciate that. We love mocking the lousy, stinking Gators. And in 268 days, we think Georgia's going to get some revenge. It's our Gator Hater Countdown. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Appreciate all of you being here with us for that. Really, really good stuff. And we'll take some of your comments here right now, as a lot of folks having a lot of folks doing some good stuff around here. Let's see what's going on. I started on YouTube yesterday. I'll start on Facebook here today for a couple of minutes, and we shall see how it all goes. So we have a new home for Matt Landers, though. Is that what I'm hearing? Is it Toledo? He's going to be a Rocket, going to be playing in the Glass Bowl, one of the hallowed homes of Group of Five football. The Glass Bowl will now be the home to Matt Landers. So good stuff there from Mr. Landers. I can't remember my wife's birthday half the time, but I know the name of the stadium that Toledo plays in. I guess that's part of my problem. Georgia and Olive, happy for Jermaine King winning the big prize. Yeah, I got that sent more than once. I should have just given everybody credit for it, but I did give it to Jermaine. I knew this was coming. Demarius Franklin says, can we remove Newman from those videos and put in JT Daniels instead? Here's the problem we have, and I'll just let you completely come behind the scene on this. I don't think that coronavirus, listen, this is in kind of a lighthearted sense. When it comes to how it's impacted us, I think the biggest impact it has had on us, beyond the very serious health stuff, which we're all aware of, like, it has totally depleted our videos. In a normal year, we'd be getting all kinds of video of like pregame warm-ups and all that kind of stuff, but there was none of that to happen this year. So part of the reason why you still see number 9 playing quarterback for Georgia is we just don't have a ton of video to show these days. So hopefully we're going to be getting more video in the year to come, but that's part of the reason why you still see. And I listen, after all said and done, I still think Newman looks good in that Georgia uniform. He's certainly in good condition, but that's part of the reason why you still see Newman there, because we just don't have a lot of video. So yeah, that's that. Randy Hall says we win the Silver Shoe Award, second place in major recruits. Noah Sewell, Mason Smith, Tony Grimes, James Williams. Randy, normally you're such a happy guy. That is a very, very, I would say, unfortunately accurate, but also sad way to frame all of that. Matt Rugavina says we've still got Major Burns, Keely Ringo, Jalen Kimber, Lewis Seen. Our secondary looks good. See that? Look at Matt. He's being very, positive. Randy Hall, normally very positive, but today. Good to see our friends at Merriweather and Tharp checking in. Loved the interview with Jeff with Gunner on Before the Hedges. Yeah, top receivers want to play with him. That's a very important point there. And we'll get more into this tomorrow because Jeff will be with us. Is the impact that Oscar Delp, who's there at West Forsyth, and Kojo Antwi, the impact that Gunner's already having on those big time targets, both literally as a receiving target, but also targets for UGA for the class of 2022. It does seem like Gunner Stockton's have a big impact for those guys. Tim Tatum says, watch out for Latavius Brini as well. And I do think that's true. When Georgia signed like 100 defensive backs to the class of 2017, you can go back and find some old audio on the show where we're probably wondering, wait, does Georgia really need, a battalion of defensive backs? Well, lo and behold, I think you're probably glad now you have some of those guys because you see how Eric Stokes blossomed. So Brini, I'd say Amir Speed, you got some guys that may still be heard from that 2017 class. Yeah, it's funny. I would mention Speed, and Joey Waddell mentions him too. I've said this before about Amir. If you saw Amir Speed going through a pregame warm-up or going through a spring practice, you would assume that he is the grad transfer. Oh, that must be the grad transfer that Georgia brought in from so-and-so state university because he's tall, he looks the part. He just hasn't had his chance yet at Georgia. But I have not sold my Amir Speed stock. I can promise you that. And I'm not also saying he's going to be, whatever, the next Eric Stokes. But that's a buy and hold for me. Amir Speed has been a buy and hold for me this entire time. By the way, Jermaine King coming into the Facebook comment section, take a victory lap here. I like the idea, too, of Kirby and Muschamp joining forces to take down their evil former master. I like the idea of that. John Cooksey says we should just show old video clips. Yeah, we sometimes do that. Tim Tatum says, do we want Toto? For some reason, I guess the chatter online has been that there's, first of all, Georgia's loaded at linebacker, so I don't know there's a ton of, even though Henry Toto's a very good player, I don't know that there's a ton of room there. I also, I just haven't heard anything connecting Georgia to Toto. Robbie Pearson says about David Green. Yeah, David's a great guest of ours from time to time, too, and we are hopeful to have David Green back on the show again very soon. Very soon. Scott Gentry says, time to take the next step. Stomp them lousy stinking Gators. Beat Bama. Win the national championship. I love it. Epic Robinson, thanks for the kind words. Robert Barnes, talking about Carson Beck pushing JT Daniels and earning that number 2 spot. And, yeah, I mean, he's certainly going to have his chance to do that. And, I can't wait to see how this competition plays out. Admittedly, and this is always true, right? The conversation is always going to be about the most recent person. So we talk more about Brock Vandagriff than we did about Carson Beck because Vandagriff was a more recent thing. There's just a little bit of a recency bias when it comes to infotainment. And all of a sudden now people are talking about Gunnar Stockton more than Brock Vandagriff. Is it because that collectively people think Gunner's better than Brock Vandagriff? It's really not. It's just about the fact that people, just generally speaking, are more interested in the newer thing as opposed to the thing they've kind of already gotten used to. So at one point in time, it was Vandagriff over Beck. Now it's Stockton over Vandagriff. It's just kind of the way that things go. But that should not be taken as any kind of perceived hierarchy, related to these guys. I think they're all going to have their chance, and truly the best man will win. Now, admittedly, it's my job to give you my opinion, and I do think that Stockton and Vandagriff are a different caliber of prospect probably than Carson Beck is, but I'm also not a paid scout, and I've been wrong plenty. So the door is open in my mind for almost anything to happen with these quarterbacks, and literally I truly can't wait to see how it all plays out. Let me do one or two more. I'm going to go to YouTube. Randy Hall in Florida getting transfers. Boy, did somebody hack Randy's account? He's giving all kinds of bad news today. Randy's typically such a source of sunshine and warmth. But he is right. Florida's taking a lot of transfers. That's why I want to beat that bunch down on the field this year. So, Connor and I were talking about this a little bit off the other day. I was using kind of a weird Game of Thrones analogy. When you've got, there used to be this notion that, in fact, some of you have said this in the comment section before, that Dan Mullen was almost the perfect kind of coach for Florida. People have said in the past, if you're a Georgia fan, he's almost the perfect kind of coach because he wins just enough to keep the Florida fans happy, but not truly enough to ever be a real long-term threat to Georgia. And admittedly, that line of thought had kind of worked on me a little bit. I was kind of willing to listen to that. But now I'm of the belief that's not true, that when you have a chance to obliterate someone, you need to do it. And that's one of the reasons why the Florida loss for Georgia this past season stung me so bad. Because, first of all, I don't like losing to Florida ever, but also because I really thought that Georgia, by winning that, could have just crushed the Mullen narrative all the way around. That if you couldn't have beaten Georgia in a year in which you had experience at quarterback and really so much talent coming back, if you couldn't do that, then you were likely never going to do it, and therefore it would really kind of accelerate the spiral of doom for Mullen. Ultimately, though, he did get the win there and kind of lives to kind of tout himself and the Florida program for another year. And so this is one of those things where I don't think you can allow that situation down there to fester at all. You don't want that to be a destination for transfers. You don't want his play calling acumen to be the kind of thing that, becomes a more talked about topic. You want to go down there in Jacksonville in October and you want to crush that. You want to crush it fully and completely forever. And that's what they're going to try to do. Aaron Bryan on YouTube says UJ's been signing a lot of DBs the last 3 years, not to mention our DB's still rated higher than what Bama got. Ringo is that guy, and Brini looked really physical. I think that's true. And, Kirby has said that they always want to sign, I forget which specific number he's used, but basically it's a lot. They do want to sign a lot of defensive backs every year. And part of that is, in the modern times, you're playing with five defensive backs more frequently than you're playing with four. And at times you're playing six. And there have been a couple moments for Georgia the last couple of years where they played with seven. You go back and watch the LSU game in 2019, the SEC championship. Georgia played a good portion of that game with seven defensive backs on the field. So not only are you playing a lot of guys, a nickel is essentially a base defense now. So you're playing more snaps than not in a game with five defensive backs. And Georgia rotates a lot. Georgia doesn't rotate a ton at safety, but at cornerback or kind of like the nickelback position, things like that, they rotate a pretty good bit there. So you need a lot of defensive backs in the program because on a regular basis, you're playing almost as many defensive backs as you are really almost any position group, guys getting a significant number of snaps. So part of the reason that Georgia signs a lot of defensive backs is Georgia does play a lot of defensive backs. Not as much at safety. It seems like, your top two safeties seem to be on the field most of the time, but the other spots, a lot of rotation. Bill McConnell says... I don't know why this makes me laugh. I mentioned Georgia playing seven defensive backs against LSU, and Bill says, they didn't help us, though. They still threw all over us. And, that's kind of the way that went. As it turns out, maybe a little more pass rush on the field, a little less defensive back would have been good. Tristan West brings up a really interesting question. If Dan Lanning's still a candidate for the Central Florida job, his last thing he heard was Randy Shannon was the interim. Is that true? Is Randy Shannon the interim? I didn't know that. So I hadn't heard that. I don't know how that slipped past my normally ironclad grip on college football information, but I had not heard that Randy Shannon was getting the interim job there. So, I think any kind of group of five level thing like that, I mentioned the other day I thought Lanning might come up as a candidate there. So it's probably worth paying attention to for the moment, but it may be too late for them to find anybody right now. Christopher Rules also mentioning Keely Ringo's mom, Traley Hale, who's continuing to battle cancer. And obviously our prayers are, legitimately, sincerely with her. That's such a tough thing to be going through at a time in which that she just wants to enjoy her son and the start of his college career. She just wants to appreciate all of that. And she's just going through so much right now. So truly our prayers are with her as she continues to battle against that. And it's been great to see. One of the things that Georgia fans are really good about doing, at times with opposing fan bases, Georgia fans don't always have the world's greatest reputation, maybe fairly or unfairly. But my experience has been, I'm sure many of you would say the same thing, that when it comes to needing to rally together, show support for something, just provide comfort to people, Georgia fans do that as well as anybody does. And I think that Traley Hale, if she were speaking to us right now, might say the same thing. She's going through a tough time, but she's tough as nails, certainly appears to be, and seems to be really feeding off the support she's getting from Georgia fans. Now, finally, Randy Hall gives us something positive. He says, I love Bear Alexander. Yeah, listen, I do too. I think, first of all, it's just a great name. I was going to do a corny thing on the show today where I was going to Barry Alexander announced his UJ commitment, and this is what he had to say about choosing the Dogs. When I threw the audio, it was going to be like a bear growl. I just said that was too corny even for me. But I am really happy about having Bear Alexander as part of this class. James Tripp Pear says we are a DGD family. I truly agree with that. Daniel Aldrich says Florida fans are the worst of all. Boy, they really are. They really are. Let me do one or two more here. Dustin Williams says, I wonder if Charlton Warren didn't leave, if any of our defensive backs would have stayed. I don't know about that. I said before, Campbell has a chance to be a first-round pick, and he's probably close enough to being one, even if he ends up falling out of the first round, that maybe you'd say the risk is worth it. In Stokes' case, you kind of wonder what could he still do at Georgia. I mean, I'm not a draftnik necessarily, but it seems like he's been prominently mentioned enough that, he's kind of got his chance. And, I think that DJ Daniels kind of gotten a little bit of draft love here and there too. So I really don't know. I mean, obviously I would love for more guys who are not first-round picks to stay at Georgia. It's one of the things that Alabama seemingly been pretty good at. But you just never really know what someone's personal situation is, and I won't pretend to know for any of those guys. But I don't think Warren leaving necessarily impacted that because, Warren wasn't the guy that brought most of them to Georgia. Also interesting to see that, I guess based on some of the salary stuff that was given out yesterday, that Jamila Day is making less money than Warren was at Georgia. It kind of goes to show you that when Georgia brought in Warren, and listen, he did his job. He's Indiana defense coordinator now, so he certainly moved on. But when Georgia brought him in, that was a very aggressive coaching search, having to steal him away from Florida, and you had to pay him big bucks to do so. Kind of interesting. The Warren era is just kind of interesting in Georgia in particular because, he kind of got brought in at the late stages of the Kyrie Lam recruitment. Lam obviously still ended up going to Florida. And, kind of a part of a good Georgia defense in 2019, maybe some step back there in 2020. And frankly, I'm just not quite so sure, what his ultimate, and I use this in air quotes, UGA legacy is going to be. How much of his DNA really was on what we've seen from Georgia the last couple of years. I'm not sure that I have a good handle on that necessarily. Kevin Cook says what was left to do at Georgia was to graduate. Well, I guess that's true. A lot of these guys do come back and get their degree, though, eventually. Pete Williams says, great show. Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. Denithian Henderson says, any word on the Dominic Blaylock rehab? Yeah, that was something we didn't get from Kirby yesterday, both on Blaylock or on Marcus Rosemy-Jackson. I would like to have heard a little bit more on both those guys. So hopefully we'll get an update on that. We did not get that yesterday. Rich Olenek says corny is my middle name, and yeah, I guess I probably own that. That's probably a fair criticism. Jermaine King says I need to read the Twitch comments. Do you think I could find the Twitch comments if you gave me 10 minutes? If you gave me 10 minutes, I don't think I could find the Twitch comments, but I am going to try to find them. But I can't find them on the fly right now. Randy Hall says, is D-Rob coming back? This, to me, was the best moment of the press conference yesterday. Not to be inside baseball because, for the most part, fans don't care about media stuff. But my favorite moment of the Kirby Smart press conference, you go to the DawgNation YouTube page, you can watch this. There was a reporter that asked Smart about, and these are all, to me, valid questions. D-Rob coming back. We've heard, possibility maybe Julian Rochester might be coming back. I forget, somebody else. And Kirby just flat out would not answer the question. Like he totally just sidestepped it. So it is certainly a valid question, is D-Rob returning? And there's a couple other guys that might be, but Smart certainly missed the chance to confirm that one way or another yesterday. And I'm not really sure why, but that was kind of an interesting moment from the press conference yesterday. DawgNation YouTube page, you can find that. Frank Patterson mentioning that Dell McGee got a raise yesterday. Yeah, he did. Makes you wonder, was there some quiet overtures from the program, or, was that just, a merit-based raise for him? But he did get himself a nice chunk of money. By the way, Lanning got a big-time chunk of money. He's knocking on the door of $2 million now, which is, I think, well-deserved for him. Worm drops in to say, I have no desire to see pictures of everyone's plate of food before they eat anymore. Not sure where that came from, but I guess I'm kind of with you on that. By the way, speaking of injuries, Smart did mention some of those guys, like some of the labrum injuries, guys like Nakobe Dean have dealt with. I guess Micah Morris, maybe one of those guys too. Confirming kind of the thought they'll miss spring practice. That was Smart yesterday. Interesting on that. Matthew Wright says I can talk to people on Facebook later. Sorry about that, Matthew. Am I spending too much time over there? I feel like it's been fairly even. Johnny Lester says Facebook asks too many personal questions and sells info. Yeah, I'm not getting into the big tech wars. Listen, I have my individual problems with all the platforms. Now that's all related to business stuff. None of these platforms are perfect. I'll tell you that much. I will tell you that much. West Georgia fan says that Hankton didn't get a raise. I didn't know that. I mean, I know we wrote about that yesterday. I wouldn't read too much into that. Ray Johnson says, I want to see Muschamp's touch on the defense. Coach Boom can motivate. Ray, what I think is interesting about that is I think there's a really good chance that some of the, quote, Muschamp touch may be, showing up in areas in which you wouldn't necessarily expect. Like you said, he's a defensive-minded guy, therefore will influence the defense. I'm not quite so sure that it's not just as valuable to have a defensive-minded coach who's game planned against Georgia before, providing some tips to that offense. I mean, I think that's something that you could conceivably see going down too. Mike D says, ask good questions before I leave again. We're going to do a couple more minutes, and I'll do them on YouTube, and then we'll leave. Johnny Lester says, I hope JT's practicing throwing and timing routes with all those great, returning wide receivers and tight ends. Yeah, I think it's a huge offseason for them. And obviously a lot of this stuff goes on behind closed doors. We don't really see how it takes shape, but we'll know the results. I do think it's a lot of timing. And, I think you saw some of that from JT during the season. There was also a really good Twitter thread the other day. It doesn't really work as content on the show because it was so, specific to the various photographs and things like that. It was pretty involved. But a guy went very deep on the throwing mechanics of JT Daniels and maybe throwing a little back footish, at times when he had a chance to maybe step into throws a little bit more. And part of you wonders, well, how much is that is, kind of the lingering knee stuff? How much of that is maybe, as the commenter mentioned, timing with those receivers and tight ends? But, Daniel's getting comfortable with his body, but also getting confident in the guys that he's throwing to. A couple of throws late in the season that were just this close to being big-time plays, but either the ball hangs in the air for a minute or, slightly over or underthrown. This is the time of year to really get on the same page with all of that, and I certainly can think it happened. Silent Chaos and subject of Matt Luke. Yeah, I think that Luke's going to have a big spotlight on him this year, getting that offensive line ready to go. Steve Setzer says, how many people on here actually like B.A.? I listen because he's so pompous. Self-punishment, I guess. I'm into that. So here's the thing. However you kind of arrived here to us, if it's a hate watch or if it's an enjoyable watch, either way, I certainly appreciate you being here. And hopefully I don't take myself too seriously. But no matter what your reasoning is, whether it be self-immolation or whatever it is, just happy to have you here as a part of the show. Richard D says, what do you think about the damage Darnell Washington do to opposing defenses? Yeah, I think that when you have the physical gifts that he has, I think it does give you a chance to do really big damage. And I think I've been pretty candid about this before. I thought that a Rick Gilbert was a more polished player coming out of high school than Darnell Washington was. But I do think that by the end of their careers, that's no guarantee that Gilbert is the better player when it's all said and done. I loved Rick as a high school player. I thought he was a truly fascinating prospect. And I thought he probably was a little ahead of Darnell Washington at the start of last year. But, man, you can make up a lot of ground quickly. And in a competent offense, and that's what I think that Washington has a chance to be a part of, you could see some just exponential, rapid growth from him. And it could show up as soon as this year. It could be very big. Noah Sheldon Jr. says, am I wearing khakis right now? No, I'm wearing jeans. All right, let me get ready to go here. I really appreciate all of you being here. Thanks for being a part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Let me also give a shout-out to the AJC online, Atlanta News Now at AJC.com, something they're writing about today, which I wasn't aware of. We have the baseball All-Star Game coming up in Atlanta here very soon, but the AJC also reporting the possibility of the NBA All-Star Game is coming to Atlanta. I kind of remember the last time the NBA All-Star Game was in Atlanta, so you can just sort of decide for yourself how all of that is going to go. But interesting stuff related to the NBA All-Star Game potentially in Atlanta. Also, Mark Bradley, the columnist, with a look at the Georgia quarterback situation now that Gunnar Stockton has committed to all of that. Pretty interesting stuff. and interesting stuff related to the Atlanta public school system as well, and some of the choices they may be about to make in terms of kind of making sure everybody kind of stays caught up and where they're supposed to be academically, just given the challenges that the pandemic has provided this year. Interesting stuff there as well. Atlanta News Now at ajc.com. Make sure you check all of that out. And appreciate you being here, a part of the R.S. Andrews Cool Down, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all of that. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That is what R.S. Andrews will do for you. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Hope all of you have a great day. By the way, it was great to see the folks from Meriwether and Tharp in the comments section here today. That's always a lot of fun. Y'all have a great day. We will see you back here at 10 a.m. tomorrow. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.